the rainforest, whether it's what's happening in Ukraine, whether it's the, oops. Yeah, whether it's, you know, the slaughtering of innocent animals, whatever it might be on the environmental humanitarian level, there's so many different branches. And as some of us who may have been in the field of activism, it's inconceivable to try to get to every branch of activism, you know, on the political, environmental, social, humanitarian. But as we hear from Bhagavatam, if we go to the root, if we water the root, yata taron mula nishecha nena, if we go to the root, which is Krishna, or if we feed the belly, then all other concerns are addressed. So bhaktas, devotees of Krishna, we're not apathetic to the world concerns. In fact, for a practicing bhakta on the Pilgrim's Progress, we really want to imbibe this particular verse. And this is very foundational in how we express our activism. So I'll read the translation again. May there be good fortune throughout the universe, and may all envious persons be pacified. May all living entities become calm by practicing bhakti yoga, for by accepting devotional service, they will think of each other's welfare. Therefore, let us all engage in the service of the Supreme Transcendence, Lord Sri Krishna, and always remain absorbed in thought of him. So Srila Prabhupada starts the verse, purport. The following verse describes a Vaishnava, Vancha kalpatarubhyascha, kripa sindhubhyevacha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Just like a desire tree, a Vaishnava can fulfill all the desires of anyone who takes shelter of his lotus feet. Prahlad Maharaj is a typical Vaishnava. He prays not for himself, but for all living entities, the gentle, the envious, and the mischievous. So Dhritarashtra could definitely be in that category, and definitely Duryodhana especially. He always thought of the welfare of mischievous persons like his father, Hiranyakashipu. Prahlad Maharaj did not ask for anything for himself. Rather, he prayed for the Lord to excuse his demoniac father. This is the attitude of a Vaishnava who always thinks of the welfare of the entire universe. Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Dharma are meant for persons who are completely free of envy, parama nirmatsaranam. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj prays in this verse, Kalau prasiddhatam. May all the envious persons be pacified. The material world is full of envious persons. But if one frees himself of envy, he becomes liberal. This is a beautiful phrase. If one frees himself from envy, he becomes liberal in his social dealings and can think of others' welfare. Anyone who takes up Krishna consciousness and engages himself completely in the service of the Lord cleanses his mind of all envy. Manascha badram vajatar adokshaje. Therefore, we should pray to Lord Narasimhadev to sit in our hearts. We should pray, Bahir Nrsimho, Hridaye Nrsimha. Let Lord Narasimhadev sit in the core of my heart, killing all my bad propensities. Let my mind become clean so that I may peacefully worship the Lord and bring peace to the entire world. And then I'm just going to skip forward a little bit here to the next paragraph. When Prahlad Maharaj chants Om Namo Bhagavate Narasimhaya, he prays for a benediction from the Lord because he is also an exalted Vaishnava. He wants nothing for his personal sense gratification. The first desire expressed in his prayer is Swastyastu Vishvasya. Let there be good fortune throughout the entire universe. Prahlad Maharaj thus requested the Lord to be merciful to everyone, including his father, a most envious person. According to Chanakya Pandit, there are two kinds of envious living entities. One is a snake, and the other is the man like Hiranyakashipu, who is by nature envious of everyone, even of his father or son. Hiranyakashipu was envious of his little son Prahlad, but Prahlad Maharaj asked a benediction for the benefit of his father. Hiranyakashipu was very envious of devotees, but Prahlad wished that his father and other demons like him would give up their envious nature by the grace of the Lord and stop harassing the devotees. Kala prasiddhatam. The difficulty is that the kala, envious living entity, is rarely pacified. One kind of kala, the snake, can be pacified simply by mantras or by the action of a particular herb. Mantra shodhi vasha sarpa kalakena nivaryate. An envious person, however, cannot be pacified by any means. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj prays that all envious persons may undergo a change of heart and think of the welfare of others. If the Krishna consciousness movement spreads all over the world, and if by the grace of Krishna everyone accepts it, the thinking of envious people will change. Everyone will think of the welfare of others. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj says, Shivam mito diya. In material activities, everyone is envious of others. But in Krishna consciousness, no one is envious of anyone else. Everyone thinks of the welfare of others. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj prays that everyone's mind may become gentle by being fixed at the lotus feet of Krishna, Bhajatad Adokshaje. As indicated elsewhere in Srimad Bhagavatam, Savai Mana Krishna Padaravindayo. And as advised by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 1865, Man Mana Bhavamad Bhakto, one should constantly think of the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Then one's mind will certainly be cleansed, Cheto Darpana Marjanam. Materialists always think of sense gratification, but Prahlad Maharaj prays that the Lord's mercy will change their minds and they will stop thinking of sense gratification. If they think of Krishna always, everything will be all right. So, this is real activism, very radical activism. I meet a lot of devotees. I can relate to my own journey before Krishna consciousness. There was this phase of, I was part of a group called Student Alliance for Awareness. I was going to different protests. And in fact, even before I took to ashram life, I did this walk across the country. It was called Walk Across America for Mother Earth. It was protesting the nuclear testing on the Shoshone land of Nevada. And it was very exciting. It was very dynamic. It was a real frontline experience. Being part of these types of events, walking from town to town, doing kind of educational programs at YMCAs and schools and things like that. And at a certain point, I was just kind of feeling overwhelmed, a lot of times even anger, because the more I started to find out about things, like, I started finding out about what happens at slaughterhouses, or the dolphins are being killed, or as a teenager, I started studying about the rainforests and how valuable they are. And then they're being cut down so that people can graze cattle and sell a Big Mac at McDonald's. So there was a lot of kind of transformative experiences happening, becoming vegetarian, starting to just adjust my lifestyle so it was more in line with these activist principles. But then reading a verse like this, it takes it to a whole nother level. And coming to Krishna consciousness under the vision and guidance and kind of missionary spirit of Srila Prabhupada, there was definitely no lacking as far as being part of an activist movement. I think for myself especially, I wasn't going to take part in some kind of organization that was going to be anything less than these kind of activist groups that I was a part of. There was Earth First, Animal Liberation Front, our local university branch of activism. I was definitely not going to just succumb to just being part of an organization that the leadership and vision was going to be anything less than what I was already a part of. And so I really felt that, wow, this person is I didn't know the term Senapati Bhakta, which means, a devotee general. Mahaprabhu coined that there will be a Senapati Bhakta, a devotee general who will spread this Krishna consciousness, Krishna's holy name, throughout the world in the future. So I definitely could feel that I'm taken to this Krishna consciousness, not just so I can get comfortable in a religious organization and just do some rituals and have some kind of satisfaction of being part of a religion. I was wanting to continue that spirit of being an activist and doing something for this world. And this prayer of Prahlad Maharaj and this mood of Vidura resonated and continues to resonate with me, that I'm part of an incredible mission that's very radically based on activism principles as far as a concern for the world. You can imagine just a tree with many branches and just having an awareness of the leaves and the branches and thinking, wow, I want to put water on those leaves and branches. And at a certain point, we'll be frustrated, no matter how dynamic we are, because the tree is going to not survive for very long, or the plant won't survive for very long. So in the field of mundane activism, which there's some credibility to it, but what happens is we're watering the branches and the leaves. One branch, again, it might be the rainforest. One branch might be, protesting wars. One branch might be, challenging the, drug dealers. One branch might be, child abuse. There's so many different areas of activism. And at a certain point, it could just be very overwhelming. And then when we learn about the root, if someone says, hey, there's actually a root to this tree, you can't see it, but if you put water in the ground, at the bottom of the trunk, all the branches and leaves will be tended to. So it's not that when we come to Krishna consciousness, we don't care about all the different branches and leaves. In fact, we have more of a comprehensive picture of care. It's not limited to just maybe welfare work just for our country. Like Srila Prabhupada would say, all right, you're thinking well of your country, you have some pride for your nation, but then what about the animals that live on your land? Are they also not part of America? So he would even challenge people that were activists and nationalists. He would say, all right, if you're a nationalist, then what about the cows and the chickens and the pigs? Are we limiting it to just humans? So this is really radical activism going to a whole nother level. And so if someone introduces us to watering the root of the tree, then the spirit of welfare work expands exponentially. And we can see it in Vidura, we can see it in Prahlad Maharaj, and so many of the acharyas, they're thinking like this. Lord Shiva and the 8th canto, they're thinking that how can we be of service to bring up the consciousness of those who are sleeping. Jeev Jago, wake up sleeping souls, wake up sleeping souls. And this is the greatest activism that one can engage in. And Krishna, and when we engage in this type of activism, it's very dear to Krishna. Krishna says in the 12th chapter, there's a whole thread of verses, Priyosame, those who are dear to him. And right in the thread of those verses, Krishna says, one who is equal to friends and enemies. There's so many verses about the qualities of one who's dear to Krishna, how they're beyond duality between, and throughout the Bhagavad Gita, maybe when we open it up to discussion, there's so many beautiful references about how a practitioner of yoga, bhakti, shows the qualities of one who's beyond duality. But in the 12th chapter, there's those thread of verses, and in the purport, Prabhupada actually says in the purport, he refers to the 10th canto, and he says a devotee, how does he, just like in today's verse, he doesn't think of Dhritarashtra as an enemy, or Prahlad Maharaj doesn't see his father as an enemy. He's thinking, this person is acting as my enemy because I have done something. Therefore, I should actually maybe deserve even worse. But by the grace of Krishna, I'm just getting a little reaction. And in fact, let me think of my enemy's welfare. Prabhupada elaborates kind of in the gist of that theme in the first of those verses in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, about those who are dear to Krishna, one who is equal to friends and enemy. So this is, anyways, this theme of activism, thinking of others' welfare, and how as practicing bhaktas, we're also all on the pilgrim's progress. We all will have an opportunity where someone might kick us out of our house, maybe a brother or a parent, or someone might really condemn us, may shun us, may shame us, may ridicule us. Prabhupada gives the example of Lord Jesus. He says, just like in the West, we have such a popular example of Lord Jesus. They were killing him, his own people. And what was his consciousness? Forgive them, my Lord, for they know not what they're doing. Prabhupada would give that example. And then he would also give the example of Haridas Thakur, of Lord Nityananda, so on and so forth. So we all have a wonderful example, regularly hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, Gora Lila. We have so many incredible examples in our Vaishnava tradition of personalities who were transcendental activists and who were on this platform of para upakara, always working for the welfare of others, who were in the mood of Prahlad Maharaj, praying swastyastu vishvasya kalo prasidatam, may all envious persons become pacified by practicing bhakti. And then, of course, we're all in this chapter of Vidura right now. So to really invite, really taking a moment and inviting the presence of Vidura in our hearts and meditating on his actions and how he moved in his behavior, and really inviting that to sink into our hearts, and then praying that we may also follow in his footsteps. And of course, all the acharyas are in this mood. And if we study the life of Srila Prabhupada, we can just see how he always maintained this spirit of para upakara, suffering 2 heart attacks, manuscripts getting stolen, drunkards and drug addicts attacking him, whatever, so many reversals, so many challenges, by himself, landing in the East Coast in the 60s. And definitely there were so many situations where he could have just given up and said, this is too much. I'll go back to Vrindavan and just do my practice in my bhajan there. No, he was in the mood of Prahlad Maharaj, in the mood of Vidura. He had that place in his heart. He thought of them in the corner of his heart. So despite all the different challenges and reversals, our acharyas, and we can see in the life of Srila Prabhupada, he never lost sight of vision. He always saw, Krishna, these are people are downtrodden. This is a Kali Yuga atmosphere. People are suffering. I've been given this seemingly impossible order from my spiritual master, and I'm not going to give up. And I'm going to continue with the spirit of swastyastu vishvasya kalo prasidatam. May there be good fortune for all living entities. And with that dedication, he traveled the world 14 times from 1966 to 1977, and maintained this as a very foundational principle in how he moved and blessed the world. So yeah, those are a few thoughts from my side as far as the glories of Vidura and how he kind of responded to this situation with Dhritarashtra, how he's an incredible example of one on the pilgrim's progress. And then side by side, we heard Prahlad Maharaj's beautiful prayers and showing how all the acharyas, how they move in this manner. And we can rest assured and feel fully confident that we have the most dynamic activists that we can take shelter of. Om Tat Sat, Hare Krishna. Maybe some reflections or takeaway points or discussion, however the format is that you all normally carry on with. Hare Krishna. Yes.
Krishna Prabhu, I appreciate your class very much. It's so inspiring to hear your past life activist stories, and then there's like activist story, like you are attracted to this Hare Krishna movement because that's the activism, the highest welfare. I'm really inspired by it. And then when you spoke about the tree, I really like, it was the first time that I actually got like some understanding of the metaphor, because it like makes sense that if I water the root, the branches will get water, but like practically I never had any grasp of it. So that was very helpful for me. But how you put it together, like the animals in the slaughterhouse and the rainforest. And, yes, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that reflection. It's really important because even especially coming to Krishna consciousness or any kind of spiritual tradition, my experience, I've seen it a little bit even in myself, and observed it in others, where one, it's possible that we can become apathetic or indifferent and sometimes lose sight of that spirit of activism that some of us may have had. And then we can kind of get in this mood of, all right, I've joined a religion, I've done my rituals, I've done my routine, I've chanted my rounds, I've bowed down to the deities, I took some Charnamrita, and I'm all okay now. And of course, there's no loss in that. But there's a term, what is called Kanishta Bhakta. It's practicing Krishna consciousness, practicing devotee of the Lord, but more on an external platform. And so one thing we want to guard against, and I'm glad you shared just this point that I was speaking on, is that we want to make sure, and at least in my life, I need to regularly remind myself, and if we're reading Prabhupada's books regularly, they're definitely reminders, but to really put it into practice in the sense that we want to be careful that we don't just settle into just, okay, I'm a member of a certain institution, I have my kind of daily practice, and I just sort of sink into those as a routine. And it can become niyamagraha, which Rupa Goswami describes as just doing something for the sake of doing it, or even kind of neglecting, it can be also neglecting the rules and regulations, or following the rules and regulations just in a mechanical manner. Whereas when we progress to Madhyam Adhikari, then we start to have that feeling of seeing the world and having even if our heart's not full on the platform of these acharyas, at least like Prabhupada is saying here, we keep a little corner of our heart. In the corner of our heart, we're thinking, oh, Krishna, there's suffering in this world, and how can I be of service to relieve the suffering in whatever way it might be, whether it's within our own family, our neighborhood, community, colleges, in whatever field that our service is in. How can we keep this spirit of thinking of others' welfare? So yeah, we don't want to settle into complacency and just mechanical observation of our practices. We want to stay alive in the spirit of being a spiritual activist. Yeah. So yeah, thanks for your appreciation, Hare Krishna. Yes, I'm not seeing the names. Oh, there we go. Damayanti, Hare Krishna.
Go ahead, Damayanti Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, thank you for the class. Hold on, the view changed. Okay, I can see you better. Tusta Krishna Prabhu. I really appreciate in your class how you glorified activism. It's not really something I usually hear in like Srimad Bhagavatam classes, because, well, I guess activism is usually seen as like fighting for something material. I mean, that's kind of what it is, a material cause, not necessarily a spiritual cause. But for a moment, I feel like, yeah, there's something we can learn from activists. And and I'm thinking it's helpful to have an activist background coming into Krishna consciousness and joining the mission of Srila Prabhupada, because there's already that spirit of activism, acting and serving and looking out for who needs help. And so that was inspiring for me. And it because I had some of that in my background, not like a huge amount of activism, but I had association and I had some activism activities, and well, I can dovetail that energy and appreciate that experience, that it gives me that spirit of like service and looking out, what can I do next? And now, the mission has changed for me mostly. I mean, I still care about anyone who is oppressed and the animals, and but now I have also a spiritual element of activism, and and anyway, I appreciate the glorification of activism for this class, and there's definitely a place for that in Bhakti Yoga, serving Krishna. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, I'd like to ask you a question from what you were sharing. What was your experience as far as, because on the social, political, humanitarian, environmental, a lot of the activism is external. There's a lot of external charge, and I was going to ask you, did you have kind of an experience sort of internally when you took the Krishna consciousness that was something unique as far as something that might have been missing in the other forms of activism?
Thank you for the question. Well, some of the activism I did was around like oppression, like isms, you know, and the biggest thing that I got worked up about was climate change. And that actually, I got so, it was actually exactly when I met Krishna consciousness, I became like, I would say so devoted to Mother Earth. I was thinking I could die for this cause. What am I gonna, I was like actually going crazy. Like I lost I lost like functioning for a few days, and then someone called me and invited me to a Sapato seminar. And then I met devotees and I started practicing Krishna consciousness all within a month of, so yeah, there was something missing, which was the spiritual element. And I realized that before the phone call came, I was like, I can't sustain this intensity of like, I'm gonna give my whole life to a cause without something to ground me. And I knew about Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. And I was like, well, they had spiritual life, so I probably need that. And then I got a phone call, and so it was like immediately related to spiritual life. But you know, yeah, that's one story I could share.
Thank you. Beautiful. Yes, Malini Prabhu, and I see a Gajendra Prabhu with his hand up. So,
Hare Krishna, Tusta Krishna Prabhu, thank you for your class. And in thinking of activism, what also came to my mind is that it comes after frustration from material enjoyment. You know, like it's a level of advancement in some ways, and also is described how people who go towards impersonalism, when they come down as activists, because to just think of themselves is not satisfying anymore. Gratifying my sensing, gratifying my belly, gratifying my mind. There is no more juice there. They already exhausted all the juice. And then it's about going to something bigger than themselves in activism. So that came to my mind also to think about it. And then and I know when I came to Krishna consciousness, I felt the same. I wanted to serve the world, and I still feel like that. I want to serve the world. I want to serve the world. And how to serve the world, then that Srila Prabhupada tells us how. And he tells us also by giving us an example, by serving us first. Like, you know, like if we are in an airplane, like we want to serve us first, but not that we need to be pure devotees to preach. However, because of our own experience in our own life of seeing the inner transformation and outer transformation, then naturally we want that for others because we have experienced it and we feel pain that, oh, others don't experience that. It's almost like the activism is it's finding gratification in external change. And it seems the activism of Krishna consciousness is more like wanted to share an experience I have, and I want everybody else to have that experience. And then about Viduha, I had a question, like a comment and a question, because at the beginning of this chapter, well, the previous chapter, I believe, then we see how Viduha, when he leaves the palace, when he's kicked out by Duryodhana, he kind of connects with his deeper desire. His deeper desire wasn't to stay at the palace. His deeper desire wasn't to serve Dhritarashtra. However, as a Vaishnav, as a Brahman, as a Kshatriya, he was doing his duty. But then when something interfered with his duty, he was like, great, I can finally do what I want to do, which is to focus on Krishna consciousness. So I'd like to hear from you about that part too.
oh, yeah, very nice point. Just going back to your initial one, Yeah, thank you so much for sharing this point of, for as far as activism, our activism really is it starts with Cheto Darpana Marjanam, cleansing the mirror of the heart and the mind. I've many times when I meet people, I say, if you, just by chanting on these beads, Hare Krishna mantra, and by reading Srimad Bhagavatam and living the lifestyle of a bhakta, of a devotee of the Lord, this in itself is doing such good for the world. Just the presence of a person who chants Hare Krishna and reads Srimad Bhagavatam and lives by its principles, they themselves, their presence is actually doing good for the world. So much more than opening thousands of hospitals and going to thousands of protests. It's an incredible act of compassion just to wake up every day and dedicate oneself to spiritual practice. I like what you were saying versus just, sometimes we see with those who don't have that personal connection with Krishna, they come back down and then they're interested in doing some type of welfare work still. And regarding the second point, it reminds me of also it was with King Vena. Let's see. Yeah, Vena was that boy that killed his friends. And then the father, I can't remember the father's name, but he actually took it as a blessing. Do you remember Vena's father?
I think it's King Anga.
Anga, that's right. So he actually saw it as a blessing. Initially, it was just like, oh my gosh, how could I this is my son. It's like, I want to train him to be a nice Kshatriya, warrior, noble person. And he was like ruthless, killing his own friends. I mean, just the worst of the worst. And one could be like, oh man, I'm a bad dad, or gosh, what a bad deal I got. Look at my other friend. They got great sons, and like their sons are, such noble Vaishnav Kshatriyas, and look at, I got a bad deal. This isn't fair. Or like you brought up with Vidura, he actually, and Prabhupada elaborates in many of the purports, he actually said, this is actually very favorable. This is very favorable because now I can give up these attachments. And it sounds quite radical, like, oh my gosh, that sounds really heartless. Like he's, isn't he wishing his son could just be more aligned with his desires? He tried his best. He did his best that he could do. And then he realized it's out of his hands. And then he saw it as actually an opportunity. And I really liked what you were bringing up, that with Vidura in these situations, while it's happening, it might seem really confusing. And right in the heat of the moment, it's, why is this happening to me? We start questioning. We might say things like, this isn't fair, or like, why did I get this bad deal? And then as we continue to move forward with enthusiasm, patience, confidence, utsaha nishchaya daryat, then we start to see kind of Krishna's magic. We start to see like, oh, now I can see what Krishna is doing. Do you have some further realizations and insights to this phenomena that happens? I was thinking of Srila Prabhupada too. I believe his pharmacy got broken into when he was younger. Everything was falling apart. And in the moment, even he had a dream. His Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, saying, take sannyas. And he was like, what's going on? I can't do that, And anyways, even Srila Prabhupada. And then he could see it. And then he would quote, yasya hamanugrinani. When Krishna favors a devotee, he takes things away. But in the moment, we see these great personalities, even they have some kind of emotion, like, what's going on? This is overwhelming. But then they'll take a moment. Oh, yasya hamanugrinani. Oh, Krishna is taking things away. But then other doors are opening. But maybe any further insights from you, Malini Prabhu, as far as this beautiful reflection of Vidura that you were highlighting?
Inspired by what you shared on both of my comments. I feel inspired and like stimulated in my, spiritual consciousness. And Srila Prabhupada also, when his wife saw this manuscript, which must have been so crushing, like at the time, it was all by hand, the whole Bhagavad Gita, translated and purported. I imagine it was like he was like coming to a point in his life that he had space to devote to the mission of his spiritual master. He had his manuscript that he complete, and the wife taken away and said it. You know, like, Mess, she's alive.
Yeah.
Alive. Yes, and so yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I can see that in my own life when one door closes, no matter how it closes, there is 3 or 4 doors opening, and those doors open to places that are again and again more deeply aligned with deeper desires. Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, definitely. That was beautifully said. Deeper desires, and that's Vidura. We could see he definitely experienced that fulfillment of those deeper desires of his pilgrim's progress. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you.
Hi, Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu.
I think Gajendra and Prabhu and Dear Govinda Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Wow, I really appreciate your class, Prabhu. The whole subject really touches me very deeply, and you know, you're bringing up this issue of activism and different endeavors that people may have, that they're inspired, you know, to kind of want to make the world a better place, to address a lot of the difficulties. And you touched upon some really core teachings, for example, watering the root of the tree and not trying to go and ineffectually, you know, water the leaves, etc. It really brings me more and more to the essential of really that whatever we're doing, that we're actually doing in relationship to Krishna, to please Krishna, above anything else. That's the one thing that really is what we have to do. It's really, really the one thing that really matters. And from that place that we need to maintain that consciousness, that feeling, Krishna may guide us into various services. You know, he may guide us into an activity that may, you know, parallel and appear to be similar. I mean, a devotee could open a hospital, a devotee could care about the environment, but there's also a very, very, very important distinction to how the devotee is speaking about these things, moving about these things, all the tantric aspects of it. And I think it is really, really important because we are looking really for an eternal state. And that's the one place where that preservation is really taking place on the eternal level when we're actually connected to Krishna, doing it as bhakti yoga. Otherwise, even if we're wonderfully successful, you know, we raise $1 billion and open many well-run hospitals, it's temporary. It is temporary. And the other part of it that I feel is really important, aside from the fact that devotees going to do these things, bringing the holy name to it, bringing the teachings of Guru and Krishna, but to actually sustain oneself, I think one has to progress spiritually with these things. I don't really think one can stay in a place of mode of goodness. You're either going to need to move toward pure goodness and transcendence, or something's going to happen. A little ankle bell, a little distraction, something's going to call. So I do find that even to continue to care about these situations in the world, that if one doesn't have it harmonized or balanced by their Krishna consciousness, they're going to run into trouble. And what you said much earlier in your class, like these different endeavors, when lacking Krishna conscious, it's like, oh, somebody like, oh, peace is wonderful. And then 5 years later, they're angry because the government's not responding and they're making pipe bombs. It's like you lose it because it's about you. It's about this concept. It's not really that connection that I'm doing this because I'm loving Krishna. And that brings it down, I think, in keeping that type of peace and equanimity while we're in motion, is because a devotee understands that Krishna is Parameshwar. Krishna is the owner and controller. The devotee has an understanding of the temporary, and he doesn't get too attached to all these things. And so I find Krishna consciousness, for me, and really I think for everyone, ultimately is essential to activism. In other words, real activism is Krishna consciousness, and anything else is just a partial representation at best, or a perverted reflection at worst. Hare Krishna.
Rest. Well, thank you, Gajendra Prabhu. I really like the point when you said that when we take to Krishna consciousness, it's possible that some of our service or vocation, it's possible that it might manifest as activism. It might even look like that. It's interesting you bring that up. I do a little neighborhood trash cleanup regularly, and we just walk around with buckets and and I used to do that on the beach as a teenager. After we'd go surfing, we'd pick up trash on the beach. And it was just something we did because we were like wanting to be like, concerned citizens of the environment. And now when I do it, I reflect when there's some reference Prabhupada says, if one sees tamogun, some ignorance, but doesn't do something about it, then one's in tamogun, some gist of that principle. Oh, wow. So meaning that, so if we see kind of ignorance, but we don't do anything. So as I'm picking up trash, I'm also thinking, this is Krishna's environment. We have a temple nearby. So Krishna's not limited to just the 10 by 30 foot space on the altar. This is Krishna's, he lives in Krishna lives in our neighborhood. So I really liked what you're saying. If we aspire towards the Shuddha Sattva platform, then we see everything with Krishna in the center, and then even picking up trash around the neighborhood can kind of be part of our Krishna conscious experience. So I really liked what you said, that even in Krishna consciousness, some of our work might manifest as seemingly externally look like what activists do, but ultimately we're doing it for Krishna's pleasure. Which is sustainable. Thank you for, I really appreciate it how you unpack that.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Dear Govinda Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Tusta Krishna Prabhu. I'm very inspired by your class and by the discussion, everyone sharing. And I appreciate right there at the beginning of your class, you referenced earlier in the chapter, Prabhupada uses this term pilgrim's progress. And we know, of course, in his past times, he was educated in the British education system. And this is it might be the most well-known book in Christianity after the Bible, the Pilgrim's Progress by John Bunyan. And so Prabhupada's referring to that. So I was reflecting that you referenced that. So the pilgrim is named Christian there. And he encounters very severe challenges, very severe, as you were saying, it's pilgrim. Okay, I'll visit this place and I'll visit that place, and it'll be flowers and very severe challenges. And then I was thinking about another well-known book about, in a sense, pilgrimage in the Christian tradition. There's the Dante's Divine Comedy. And so Dante himself is the pilgrim, accompanied by the Roman writer Virgil. And so of course, Dante's going to paradise. He's going to paradise. And to go to paradise, he first goes through hell. and like really hellish situations. So that was just coming to me. And then from hell, like 9 levels of hell, then he goes to purgatory and then gets to paradise. So I'm just thinking, like, I like that point you started the class with, that like, because someone could think like, well, okay, I'm taken to spiritual life now and self-realization and Krishna consciousness. So this will be easy. So like all of these references, all of these references, could just like let's say if someone wants to win an Olympic gold medal, or someone wants to be really successful in business, we know they go through a lot. They, no pain, no gain. So it kind of makes sense. Well, if I want a goal, I'm going for a goal. This pure devotion to Krishna, to please Srila Prabhupada. I'm going for a goal that's far, far, far more valuable than an Olympic gold, or to make $1 million a year in business, or to get a PhD. So it's kind of like natural to expect. Yeah, there's that we're gonna enter into. It's going to be painful. There's going to be some hellish situations that Vidur is running into, Srila Prabhupada ran into, Haridas Thakur ran into. And then I so much appreciated your emphasis there in the class, that your class of yours, like, okay, so how to cultivate a consciousness to respond to these difficulties, challenges, sometimes hellishly severe challenges, how to respond to them such that we tatenu kamsam, so that we're steadily deepening our enthusiasm to an inspiration to go for the goal. And so that's one thing that came to me. And then it also related to what you expressed in the discussion. I appreciated you established Srila Prabhupada as the ultimate activist. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, as part of our discussion in class yesterday, we reference this Tad Vag Visargo Janataga Viplavo. That Viplavo means revolution, and like the Narada Muni says that this Bhagavatam is meant to create a revolution in the impious lives, and a revolution in consciousness. And so we don't really see, until 60 years ago or so, but Bhagavatam creating much of a revolution. It certainly was appreciated by Vaishnava sages for sure. But then we can see like that verse in Bhagavatam predicting Prabhupada giving Bhagavatam in Western language and creating a revolution through the Bhagavatam. And and so I'm reminded in this discussion of there's a 1944 Back to Godhead article, 1944, and Prabhupada, he's writing about in a sense an activist group called the Theosophists, Madame Blavatsky and like that. And so Prabhupada, he's like representing the Theosophists in 1944 Back to Godhead article. And he says, he quotes some of the leading Theosophists, and they say something, it's just about this, that like, as I'm paraphrasing, but something like, as long as the weak are oppressed by the strong, we will not sleep at night, we will shed tears, and we're dedicated that the weak won't be oppressed by the strong. And Prabhupada writes, this is a very nice sentiment. There's a place for this activism, it's very noble. And then Prabhupada said, and our Vaishnava approach is really different. He said, our Vaishnava approach is really not to prevent the weak to be oppressed by the strong. He said, our Vaishnava approach to activism is to make everyone so strong they won't be oppressed. So that's revolutionary. That's super mundane, right? Because so that's why Prabhupada got on the Jaladuta, to make everyone so strong, meaning that like moving everyone to be Atmarama, right? Because as long as I'm not self-satisfied, it means I'm going to be greedy, lusty, envious, jealous, which basically means that greed, lust, fear, insecurity, I'm susceptible to be exploited by others, and I'm going to exploit others. So Prabhupada was like, yeah, that make everyone so strong, meaning just so self-satisfied, so blissful in themselves and connection, devotional connection with the Supreme, that there's just there then we're not susceptible to be exploited. I'm reminded that there was in the I think it's the your ever well-wisher video biography. I think maybe it came out late 70s, early 80s. And there's one, I think was Natchi, like some Indian business magnate, Indian business magnate, a super wealthy Indian. And he was talking about Prabhupada, and he said, like, so he met Bhaktivedanta Swami, and because like maybe some land thing, Nachi, and he goes, well, I'm a businessman, so naturally, I tried to find the weakness in this person. You know, like, where is he envious? Where is he jealous? Where is some greed? Where is some complacency? Where's what? Like I find someone's weakness, and then I can take advantage of it, and that's what I do. I'm a businessman. And he goes, and then I met Bhaktivedanta Swami for the third time, the fourth time. And he was practically frustrated and goes, I could not find any flaw or weakness in this person. I was completely defeated. So that, you know, probably just so strong spiritually, so connected with Super Soul, so self-satisfied, then there's no doorway to be oppressed. When one more thing comes to me about because there was talk about like hospitals. I know when I was in the Middle East, to illustrate this point, the root of the tree. Like I would be, let's say, like in a Jewish part of Israel, and I would say, let's say someone has money, and they use the money to open a hospital. Is that a good thing? Well, of course, yeah, that's a good use of money, not just to buy another yacht or something. So I said, okay, great. So let's say that the hospital they open is in downtown Beirut, and the hospital specializes in healing terrorists to get them, you know, back on the job. So is that still a good thing to use the money to? Well, no, that's a terrible thing. And so I would endeavor to you know, encourage everyone to think, because otherwise, if we're watering one branch, well, are we really taking care of everyone? So what's it mean to really water the root of the tree and to direct our natural activist efforts in that way? So thank you, Tusta Krishna Prabhu. Thanks for your class.
Well, could you remind me, you said Prabhupada referred to, there's a book regarding the Pilgrim's Progress. Who was the author?
The author is John Bunyan.
John Bunyan.
And the book is called the Pilgrim's Progress. Yeah.
Okay. John Bunyan.
John Bunyan.
I really appreciated, I believe you used this phrase, steadily deep enthusiasm. I think you said carrying on with steadily deep enthusiasm, and how Srila Prabhupada was such an example of that. Yeah, steady deep enthusiasm.
Yeah, for me, that gets to the essence of the Tate Nukam verse. And even, I think we can define that's pure enlightenment, pure Krishna consciousness, depending what language you want to use, that to spontaneously respond to the challenges of life, especially those times when things don't go according to our script, to spontaneously respond with deepened enthusiasm for self-realization in bhakti yoga. Yeah. And it's one thing if like 10, 20, 30 years later, I can say, oh yeah, as you were saying, that was a blessing in disguise. I realize it now. And then this Uttama Adhikari platform, with like to realize Krishna's presence everywhere, especially in those events like That's the opposite of what I want to happen with my health, with my finances, with my relationships, to spontaneously respond in a genuine way, not an artificial way, to spontaneously respond with like realizing opportunities for deepening Krishna consciousness.
Yeah, so empowering. I really like this example of, yeah, wanting to help the oppressed, but then help them to not be oppressed. It reminds me of also like, all right, people are hungry, give them food, but how empowering if we teach them how to grow food. Similar, and how enlivening, like, hey, I can grow food. Like I'm not kind of this like this needy. I'm actually like, I'm confident, I'm enthusiastic, I can grow food. And which is, if we can inspire someone on that platform, sure, we can feed them for a day, but then to actually teach them how to grow food, or like your example, help the oppressed, but then, wow, empower them and guide them to Krishna consciousness, where then, as you gave the incredible example, this person couldn't oppress Srila Prabhupada, couldn't, you know, just, he was so complete and clear, nishta, so fixed. Yeah, that was a beautiful example. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. I see another hand up here. I only see Bhakti Yoga Retreat. What is your good name?
Ladini Shakti Devidasi.
Ladini Shakti, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Krishna, I have a question. So you like rekindled my inspiration for activism through this class and discussion, for sure. And I definitely like you describe how like people might become complacent after starting practice Krishna consciousness. So I can definitely see that in me. And I guess my question is then, like, there is this quote from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta that Dira Govinda Prabhu asked me to meditate on for a day about like there is no need for any reformer in this, and if someone thinks there is a need for a reformer, he himself needs to be reformed. So I guess that's like since then I put like my activistic ideas aside. So yeah, I wonder how it goes together, these two principles.
Yeah, this is really a very, very powerful reference from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. Just going back a little in relationship to your question, one thing I experienced, especially when I did this walk, that was kind of like the culmination of my activism, going on this walk across the country. And a few months into it, I started seeing, you know, certain questionable activities. You know, people were asking, hey, when can we drink? And is there a day that we can go to the bars, like during the walk? And then, you know, I saw like just kind of loose dealings between the persons on the walk, and, you know, just not really dignified ways that the women and men were, you know, moving with each other. And yeah, just there were sort of things that just were starting to be a little questionable, as far as, you know, they were doing this activism, but then they wanted to cook, like they wanted to make hamburgers for lunch. And it's just like, wait, hold on, this is like walk across America for Mother Earth. And I started to like get kind of disappointed. And then very much, I didn't know about Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, but I saw, wow, we're trying to do all this reform, but where's the effort of our own individual reform? And so when Srila Bhaktisiddhanta speaks of this, what comes to my mind is Cheto Darpana Marjanam, that the, you know, Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtan, the complete kirtan, the Sankirtan, complete kirtan, Samyak kirtan. Why is it complete? It starts with this cleansing the heart. It's self-reform, cleansing the heart of all the dust accumulated for years. And then we see Trinadapi Sunichena, lower than a blade of grass, tolerant like a tree. It's so much internal work we see in these first few verses of Shikshashtakam. And then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta highlighting it that much more. The world, it doesn't need reformers. What it needs is persons who are reforming themselves. And that's actually a beautiful reference you shared. This is really, I guess, what I was going towards when I said a person who takes time every day to sincerely chant Hare Krishna, work on their inner purification, offer everything to Krishna, do everything for Krishna, as Gajendra Prabhu was sharing, then this is the real activism. And so we can see how Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is really confirming and reassuring us, if you're doing this self-reform, this is actually what the world is needing. This is the, the culmination of activism. And when we say spiritual activism, he really defined it with this quote about the world is not needing any reformers. Yeah, someone recently sent that to me as well. And then so we can really apply this. We can see Vidura, Prahlad Maharaj, when someone's maybe challenging us, maybe we have someone that's inimical to us or calling us names or showing us some kalaha, some envy towards us. We can see it as an opportunity. Well, what can I do for as the phrase Dear Govinda Prabhu says, steady, deepening enthusiasm. How can this inspire me for my own inner reform? And then, things like tolerance, forgiveness, but Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, one who considers the happiness and distress of others is the highest of yogis. All right, I'm into yoga. I've been presenting to students of yoga, and I shared with them this verse from the 6th chapter, that if you're interested in being a yogi, okay, you're learning some asana, some pranayama, some of the disciplines of yoga. But Krishna in the 6th chapter Bhagavad Gita, he says the highest yogi, this is how they behave, this is how they move in the world. And it's like, wow, you don't hear that in a yoga class. You hear like, all right, we're going to do Virabhadra asana, we're going to do some Nadi Shodhana and a little chanting of Om. And, we're hearing this is what people are getting in yoga. And then when you say, actually, according to the ancient yoga scripture, the supreme yoga teacher, Krishna, says that the highest of all yogis is one who considers the happiness and distress of others by dint of their own experience. This is self-reform. This is exactly what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is referring to. Yeah, thank you for highlighting that beautiful reference of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta and refreshing our enthusiasm to go deeper in our understanding of the true meaning of yoga. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
How is your times, dear Govinda Prabhu, Malini Prabhu? How is the schedule for class?
Yeah, typically we go till about 9:30, which is 7:30 your time.
Okay.
So yeah.
I'm so grateful. I don't do so many of these Zoom classes, so thanks for inviting me, Malini Devi, for sharing and reflecting on this beautiful chapter and refreshing my own appreciation of following the footsteps of these great devotees like Vidura, Prahlad Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada. And I hope we were of some service to inspire everyone. I liked Ladini Shakti Devi, inspire everyone to really be frontline activists by working on self-reform.
Thank you, Tusta Krishna. Mother Rukmini wrote on chat, one of the most spiritually stimulating, refined class and discussion I've heard for a while. Thanks, Tusta Krishna Prabhu and everyone. Hari Bol. Thank you, Rukmini. Thank you, Tusta Krishna Prabhu. Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
Yay.
Srila Prabhupada ki.
Yay.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.